Welcome to the Spot On Insurance Podcast, sponsored by Insurance Licensing Services of America, ILSA. This is Ted Tavares.
And this is Arlene Tavares.
Before we get started, remember to click on the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode.
Hello and welcome to Spot On Insurance. This is your host, Doug Foresta. I want to remind you before we get started that if you have not subscribed to the podcast on iTunes, what are you waiting for? Head over to iTunes. You put in Spot On Insurance. That way you make sure you don't miss any episodes. Today, my guest is Lesli Leakey. She is the Director of Compliance at WebCE. And our topic, what we're discussing today, is continuing education and reciprocity between states. Lesli Leakey, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, yes, I am very excited about talking about this with you today. Let's start with this idea of the required hours for CEs. And I know we chatted a little bit before we started that we can't get into the specifics today of every state in this podcast, but we're going to give people overall things to think about. Can you say a little bit in general about the required hours for continuing education? And I know we're talking about here for producers and adjusters.
So the NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, has adopted uniform licensing standards, and those standards call for 24 total hours, and 3 of those hours being in ethics to be completed every 2 years and due on the last day of the licensee's birth month. Now, as you said, we can't get into every state, and not every state has adopted those standards. Some may require more hours to be completed, and some may require less hours to be completed. And the states may also differ on when continuing education is actually due. And so it's very important to know what the requirements are for your individual state that you're licensed in. Thank
you very much. So let's talk about also this idea that when CEs need to be completed. So, I think about the person who's like, oh my gosh, my license is renewing in 5 days. I better get all my CEs in. That's probably not a good idea, right?
No, definitely not a good idea, but we do see it all the time.
So say a little bit about, when should CEs actually be completed?
As a general rule, all CEs should be completed at least 60 days prior to when your license renews. It's very important, again, to know the rules for your state, because some states require that it has to be completed, reported by the CE provider, and banked on your transcript before your actual license renewal date. And some of states require that all of that be done even prior to when you can submit to renew your license, and that also has to be done before your license renewal date. So again, very important to know the rules for each individual state, so the states you're licensed in, and that you give yourself enough time to get everything done.
What happens, can you say a little bit about, so what happens if I don't get those CEs completed in the time allotted by my state?
Some states could impose fines. You could lose your appointments. You could lose the ability to write business until you can get everything completed. It can really hurt your business and what you do to make a living if you don't get all of this completed in time.
So let's talk about some of the specific product training requirements. So, we're talking about licensing in general, but what are some of the specific product training requirements that exist for CEs?
Okay. Some of these exist in some states will have all of these, and some states will have some, and then there are still some out there that don't have any of these requirements. But there's annuity training, there's long-term care, Medicare, index products, flood, homeowners, and claims. And for the most part, these aren't required to actually renew your license. They're only required if you sell the particular products. However, there are some states that have it as part of their required hours to be completed. But I want to stress that in no case does this increase the number of required hours above 24 or whatever the state has as their required number of hours. It just means that these hours have to be part of the total required to be completed in your state.
Lesli, one of the things that I know, obviously, that people need to check and see what specifically is applicable to them in their state. Does WebCE have specific resources? I'm going to ask you to say more about WebCE at the end, but do you have specific resources or links to specific resources that I can access in order to find out more about this for my specific situation?
Yes. So on our catalog and from our homepage, you can get to the state requirements that we have for each individual state, and that will tell you what is required state by state. We also have links that will take you to an individual state's website, so you can see the actual rules and regulations directly from the state if there's something that you're not 100% sure about. We also can link to other third-party administrators that may house your transcript, and then you can go there and look at your actual transcript with the state to see what exactly is required, what you may have already completed, and it will also tell you exactly when you need to have your license renewed by.
Spot on Insurance is sponsored by ILSA, Insurance Licensing Services of America, America's premier licensing and regulatory compliance experts. To learn more about ILSA and the services they provide, visit ilsainc.com. Let's talk about reciprocity. And I know here that there might be some difference here between producers and adjusters, but can you say a little bit about what that generally looks like between states?
Absolutely. So for producers, it's actually very easy. As long as you're compliant in your home state, you can renew your non-resident producer licenses. The non-resident states will refer to the producer database, otherwise known as the PDB, to verify that you're compliant in your resident state. I have heard at various conferences from some licensing administrators that say some of the non-resident states are still requiring a letter of clearance. But for the most part, those are the thing of the past, and all of the states use the PDB to make sure someone is compliant in order to renew their non-resident license.
Okay. So the main thing for producers is I just need to make sure that I'm compliant in my home state, and then the other ones I should be good with. Correct.
Now, that's good as far as CE. There still is renewal processes for non-resident licenses that may encompass renewal fees or forms that have to be filled out. But as far as CE, as long as you complete the CE for your resident state, you don't need CE for your other states.
Great. Yeah, that's very helpful. So I'm not having to complete 50 different, if I'm licensed in 50 states, I'm not having to complete 50 different CE requirements, right?
Correct.
But how about for adjuster licenses?
So reciprocity for adjusters is not as clear-cut as it is for producers. Part of the problem is the differing CE requirements for adjusters across the states. Some states license adjusters, but don't require CE for them. Other states may not even license adjusters. It's kind of hard to explain, but you may be able to adjust claims in the state, but they don't actually have formal licensing.
Okay.
So it gets a little confusing. But there's a lot of work going on right now in that part of the industry to try to get everybody uniform and on the same level as producers. And I hope the states will get on board as changes are recommended to get uniformity. There have already been some states to get on board and start requiring CE for adjusters. And I believe more are discussing what needs to be done and talking to other states to see what works and what doesn't. Changes take time to come to fruition because of required statute modifications. The Department of Insurance can't just say, oh, this is what we're going to do, and we want to make this change. Most states require actual regulatory statutes to be changed in order to be able to license or require CE for certain license types.
So with this, I know you said, for example, with producers, I can just go with what my home state does. But if I'm in a home state that doesn't have any CE requirements, tell me if I'm wrong, but that doesn't necessarily mean then that if I'm licensed in a state that does have CE requirements for adjusters, I might actually have to meet those CE requirements. Is that right?
That's correct. So if your home state does not license adjusters, or they license adjusters but don't require CE, and if one of your non-resident licenses requires CE, then you can designate another state as your home state, meet the requirements for that state, and then have reciprocity to other states, as long as they are reciprocal with each other. And that's where it gets even more confusing. There are some states that even though both may require CE, one state has decided that, well, your requirements don't live up to the standards we hold ours to, so we're not reciprocal with you.
You might want to get some help or advice, it sounds like, perhaps.
Yes, very, very much so. And we have a lot of adjusters that will call into our call center to make sure that they take CE for the right states and that they don't take too much CE.
Right. You don't want to take excessive CEs that you don't need, right? That would be the other side of it.
Right.
Before I ask you, I'm going to ask you about posting credits and transcripts. But before I do that, I want us to take a step back a moment and ask you the question about, I guess this is a good example of this, about the importance of being proactive when it comes to CE requirements. Can you say a little bit, for the producers, for adjusters who are listening to this, can you say a little bit, in your experience from what you see, why is it important to be proactive and what does that look like?
I would say being proactive, for most licensees, you have 2 years to complete your continuing education. To reduce stress, to make sure that you have enough time to get everything done. I know a lot of states will say at least 60 days. I would say over the course of that entire 2 years, spread your CE out. Take a little bit at a time so that when you've got 6 months left on your 2 years, you're already done. And then when your renewal notice goes out from the state, your CE is done. You just have to pay your renewal fees or fill out any forms that are required. And it doesn't interfere with your business, your daily business that you need to do to make a living. When you wait till the very end, you're cramming everything into a very short period of time. And that could interfere with business that needs to be conducted. Right.
Now I have to stop what I'm doing. And I have to make sure I get these CE credits in, or as you said, there can be, real repercussions to that.
Yes. And some states have very strict rules on how online continuing education can be delivered to where you actually need all of the time to get it done. And then if you take it in a classroom, it's very hard to schedule a classroom course when you're down to a week left before you have to have everything done.
Right. That's a good point. I'm thinking about online courses, but exactly. Yeah, that is kind of difficult. Have you had that situation where people have had to kind of stop business in order to finish their CEs?
I have seen students who wait until literally the very last possible second to get CE done, and they're scrambling to get it ordered, to get it completed. They're contacting us, finding out, when's it going to be reported and posted on I've got to have it done like right now. There are some students in some cases that have actually had to drive to the Department of Insurance. And that's not convenient for a lot of people, depending on where you're located in a particular state. Because they were out of time to do everything online, they actually had to go into the department to take care of everything to make sure they renewed in time.
Wow, yeah. So don't do that, is what you're saying.
Highly recommend, don't let yourself get to that point.
Save yourself stress and inconvenience and do it over the 2 years. Let's talk about reporting of credits and posting transcripts. Can you say a little bit about that?
Sure. So this is, again, why I stress the importance of leaving yourself enough time. States allow providers anywhere from 5 to 30 days from the date of completion to report roster credits. Now, WebCE, we report every business day. So we report credits very rapidly. Not every provider is set up to do that. If you take a classroom course, the classroom providers have to wait till everything's done, and then they have to input everything. So that's why states allow us that time. So it's very important that a licensee plan accordingly based on when they renew, when they're taking the course, and how much time could be in between before it gets reported. Once credits are reported, some transcripts update instantly. Some may take up to 24 to 48 hours to post. So there's another delay in time that's possible. After all of that is completed, that information must still be transmitted to NIPR to allow the licensee to renew. That can happen instantly as well, all the way up to a few days, depending on the state that you're talking about.
My guest today is Lesli Leakey, the Director of Compliance at WebCE. Lesli, we've been talking about WebCE, but can you briefly explain a little bit about what WebCE does and how you help producers and adjusters and people in the insurance industry?
Absolutely. So WebCE is an online education company. Insurance is our primary business for offering online education to help licensees complete their continuing education. We do offer education in other arenas, such as financial planners, CPAs, tax preparers, and enrolled agents. We have a dedicated call center to help students whenever they need assistance in ordering, or if something is not showing on their transcript, or they need help just getting through that renewal period. Maybe they've waited till the last minute. They just need help getting the courses that are required to renew. And then we have an online platform that delivers it compliantly based on each individual state's requirements. And then my department handles all of the course submissions and making sure that the courses are approved, that they meet the requirements that a student needs to renew their license, and then we report the roster credits once they're completed.
And again, people can go to webce.com. Is that the best way for them to reach it?
Yes. WebCE.com, you'll see our catalog with all of our products that we offer. If you're an insurance agent and you're also licensed in something else, we can help you meet all of your education needs.
Lesli Leakey, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your words of wisdom. I greatly appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Direct your podcast questions to iask@soyteam.com. Share this podcast with your friends and remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.
As always, thanks for joining us.